Well, Shallon, thanks for jumping on. It's great to visit with you.
It's good to see you. I'm glad that you're getting on board with us to fight back against these government overreaches.
Absolutely. That's what I do. Yeah, and we have a big one to get into today. But first of all, so where are you joining us from?
So we live in the Clinch Ranger District in Southwest Virginia. We're down here in the Lehigh Scott Dickinson County area of Southwestern Virginia, the furthest southwest you can possibly go.
Okay, and you're a lifelong Virginian?
Absolutely. We are generations deep here just in the towns that we live in.
Okay. And so you and your husband Mark have a page, um, the Appalachian Homesteaders. So
The
tell us,
Appalachian Homestead, yes.
yeah. So tell us a little bit about what you guys do with that and why, and we'll get into why this topic was so important and near and dear to not just your hearts but your way of life.
So the Appalachian Homestead is just a social media thing that was born during 2020, actually. We have lived this lifestyle our entire lives, but we just weren't on social media talking about it until that time. So we're many generations into self sufficiency in both of our families. Did you have
Okay.
something to say?
Yeah. No, no, sorry.
So we're many generations deep into, self sufficiency. And this has been the way of life of our families for far longer than this nation has even been a nation. So we grow our own food, preserve our own food, hunt, fish, forage, and teach it to other people.
Okay, wow. So this is not what you guys do for a living.
No, we are not social media influencers.
Yeah. But I mean you have jobs.
Mark has a job. I stay home and
Uh-huh.
raise children, and you can hear all the craziness going on outside, and raise children and animals. Mark is the coordinator for crisis intervention. And so he's former law enforcement. He's now a mental health coordinator, and he's the liaison between the law enforcement here and the mental health facility.
Well, so good on you for being a mother who raises the kids and takes care of the home because somewhere in recent history that I mean that used to be the norm in American society and we've deviated from that and now people like frown on it. Like so many people are like why would you even want to have kids? Much less stay at home and raise them, right?
I feel like that is becoming a thing more and more. It's not so much a thing here. Here in Central Appalachia, we're still having babies. Grandparents and families are still tightly knit together for the most part. And we're still raising our children in community. In fact, just in a little bit, I'll be going to pick up our grandchildren.
Oh wow. Well, so so much of modern society fails to realize that nobody cares more about this planet than those who depend on it in its most natural sense. And yes, that does mean taking resources from time to time, a deer, a duck,
Yep.
turkey, whatever, but those resources are renewable. Um, so you guys really embody that. And uh, the folks that comment on social media from their cubicle, they're not getting out there and getting their hands dirty. If they're even eating meat, they're buying it from McDonald's or the grocery store.
I think that that's one thing that we encountered when we began to talk about the issue with the closure of the Clinch Ranger District in addition to the Mount Rogers District. Um, People were like, so just go to the grocery store. Well, here in
Yeah.
Virginia, you can purchase a hunting license and you get a sportsman's package, which is your hunting and fishing license, including your National Forest stamp and your big game tags for $104. For $104, I can fill my tags, feed my family an entire year's worth of red meat. Have you been to the grocery store lately?
Oh yeah, I love steak. I mean, we eat a ton of
Mhm.
wild game, but don't get me wrong, like a beautifully marbled ribeye. Oof, yeah, I love it.
Oh, same. I love it. But how much of that can you purchase for $104?
I wait till
Certainly
it's
not a
on
year's
sale
worth,
now. Yeah, if I'm going to buy it at
right?
all. But the backstrap in the freezer just looks. I just ate some for lunch actually, some backstrap. Um,
Right.
yeah,
So,
because
but you can't purchase very much of beef
oh,
for
you for
100
one hundred and
and
four
lamb?
dollars, you'd get like 2 meals for your family.
Correct.
Yeah,
Correct. And if you have a larger family, say you have more than just 1 or 2 children who are living at home, a family of, say, 6 or 8, you're gonna get 1 meal.
yeah, yeah. Um, what percentage of your protein does come from the wild then?
Well, I shouldn't say all because I do enjoy a ribeye steak
Yeah.
and occasionally a prime rib, but, most most all of ours. My son and daughter-in-law, their entire red meat program is venison. They're
Uh-huh.
not purchasing red meat. Mark and I sometimes do purchase red meat for various things. Um, my parents entirely venison. My brother, he'll purchase a little bit of beef, but mostly
Mhm.
venison.
Mm. Um,
It's not poison the way that other things are.
right, right. No added hormones,
Correct.
antibiotics. So then where do you guys go to get the deer?
Well, we do hunt on private land too.
Uh-huh.
But the majority of our takes are from public land because if you're farming crops, you're running deer off the property. You
Mhm.
do not want them coming in and eating your produce because that's the source of income. And we do grow and produce and sell things. That's just not our primary source of
Mm.
income.
Okay. So you guys have agriculture, garden, all that good stuff.
Oh, yes. Yeah,
Huh.
we're not going to the store and buying the things we're preserving.
Yeah. Huh.
Yeah, we're
Okay.
growing what we preserve, and we're selling some to the community as well through local farmers markets and things like that. But you can't have deer in a garden. Do you grow a garden?
A small one. I mean, I have like jalapenos, bell peppers. I suck at the carrots. They never get big enough, and it's a small garden, right? But I mean, mostly I grow peppers, all
Right.
kinds of
Well,
peppers.
deer in a field of produce is damage done and lost income
Mhm.
and lost food from your pantry.
Right.
So you spend all year running those off. Cattle farmers don't have to do that. The deer can come right on in with them. But if you're growing produce, you
Yeah.
do have to keep them run off.
Okay. And so tragically, this way of life that you guys embody was interrupted by the Biden Harris administration. Of course, now they're not the ones that said, "Hey, do this," but they're in charge. And
They are
Deb
in
Howland has her fingerprints all over this. Last week, she's closing Bears Ears Bears Ear Monument to 1.3 million acres to recreational shooting, with no record of altercations or any reason for that. The recreational shooters
right.
weren't causing a problem. She just did it. She's closed hundreds of millions of acres in Alaska to basically white people. I mean, I don't want to be racist or anything, but if you're a non-indigenous person, you no longer get to hunt there. Guess what? I own that land as an American citizen. So do you. So does everyone listening. It's our land. And she closed it. No science behind that. Like if we're wiping out the caribou, I think we'd all be like, okay, let's take a step back and let's manage this population. We don't want to wipe them out, but that wasn't what was happening. So moose and caribou off the table in huge swaths of land in Alaska for no reason. And
It's a
that's
problem across the board. It's not, here they closed 2 districts. Um, so the Jefferson and George Washington National Forest are 1.8 million acres. They
mm,
closed the Clinch and Mount Rogers districts, which makes up over, I think it's 3 to 500,000 acres of that. And they didn't just close it. So even if you don't hunt, they didn't just close it for hunting.
uh-huh,
This is also trout stocking time. October is when trout stocking begins. You can't go fish. You couldn't go hunt. You couldn't go foraging. You can't go hiking. You can't go out and even just enjoy nature
mm,
during this closure, which fortunately has been taken off and things are opening back up now. But it was because of the pressure of all of the people that, like, you brought this to the attention of. And we, through our social media channels, brought it to the attention of. And Nick Freitas,
Hmm.
thank you to Nick, because
Yeah.
he shot it out to millions of people as well.
Well, and so
And
I first saw it from my friend Gabriella Hoffman, who you guys were on with her, the District of Conservation podcast, and she sent me a text and was like, "Have you heard about this?" And I was like, and my mind was blown. So, and they did this because of um, Hurricane Helene, and I didn't realize Virginia. I mean, we keep hearing about Florida, Georgia, Tennessee, obviously the Carolinas, North Carolina, especially. No one was talking about Virginia.
well, that's because we had pockets of devastation. Like for instance, I don't know if you're familiar with Virginia Creeper Trail.
Mm-mm.
It is utterly devastated. Damascus was utterly devastated. Taylor's Valley and Connor Rock, and there are some places that were, and on up through the valley there, in Montgomery County and a few other places, there were some really hard hit flooded locations. Damascus was probably the hardest hit. So there were places that it made sense to go ahead and say, okay, these trails are closed. You can't come hike here. You shouldn't hunt here. This is dangerous. Plus, we're going to be in here working, and
Yeah.
it's just not a safe area for us if you're also in here hunting. Plus, they're going to run the deer off anyway. Who wants to hunt in a disaster area while they're working there?
Right.
Right? So that would have made sense, but that's not what happened. What happened was that a few years ago, they consolidated the Mount Rogers and the Clinch Ranger District. So when they needed to close portions of the Mount Rogers District, instead of just doing that, they closed everything.
Huh.
So it
Wow.
was this blanket closure. And you'll see later, and I've shared video in my stories on Instagram, and Nick will have tons of footage because we had him out earlier today. He was riding with us taking video. There was no reason to close us because you didn't hear about our area because we weren't affected. We have been running relief down to our neighbors in Irwin and over to Damascus because we weren't affected. If we were
Huh.
affected, we would have been talking about what happened here, not what happened an hour away.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, so I didn't even realize that. I was just assuming that those forests had a bunch of trees knocked over and trails were, you know,
No,
impassable. Wow. So no
we
reason
lost some
whatsoever.
trees.
Yeah.
I mean, we did lose some trees.
Well, that's
Nobody's
part
trying to
of
exaggerate or say
weather, right? Just trees fall over.
we lost we lost no more trees in this event than we did back in June when we had 50-mile-an-hour straight line winds,
Mm-hmm.
and we
Mm-hmm.
didn't close our forest then.
Right. Right.
It was
So
ridiculous. But one thing that I've sorry, I
no,
interrupted
go
you.
ahead.
One thing that I have been hearing since we brought this to light, people from all over the country have been reaching out to us saying, "Did you know that they closed them here too? We had a fire 2 years ago and the forests are still closed.
Huh.
It's not still burning.
Yeah. So
Why are we
why
not hearing this?"
and why do you believe the decision was made to close it?
Why do because a bureaucrat in Roanoke, 3.5 hours from here, who had not been here, had not laid eyes on any part of it, saw some stuff on the news and said, "Oh my gosh, guess we're gonna close it down." And rightfully so in pockets,
Mm-hmm.
rightfully so. Damascus, the Creeper Trail, all of that, absolutely close it down. It needs to be repaired.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing that was the most strange, and you'll really appreciate this. So that storm happened, and then October, I think it was October 1st or 2nd. My dates are running together. I don't even know what day it is. Um, that was youth weekend. So you could take your children out in the forest and hunt for youth weekend. They didn't close the forests until 4 days after that,
Mm.
2 days before regular season opened. So 2 days ago, it was perfectly fine for you to take your 5-year-old in the woods for youth
Well, how
day.
stupid
But,
is that?
but suddenly it has become so catastrophically damaged and dangerous that you shouldn't go in there for regular season.
Make it make sense. Make it make sense. I go backpacking slash elk hunting, grouse hunting in this one area of the Carson National Forest in New Mexico. And we used to be able to drive up to this trailhead, park at the trailhead, and hike in. like usually 6 or 7 miles. And one year we got there, and the road to the trailhead was closed, Forest Service road. Uh, and we came back the next year, still closed. The next year, still closed. So it was fine. We just had to walk 2 more miles, right? We had to walk on a road that was closed to vehicles, but you could hike on it. So I don't understand. I mean, that's just a misappropriation of federal funding, right? Fix the damn road. It's been 2 years
It's
now,
so bizarre.
but that's just one, personal history I have with them not taking care
Well,
of our land with our money that we give them.
since we're on that topic, there are two recreation areas here in our county. One is called Cane Patch, and the other is called Phillips Creek.
Mm-hmm.
And they're located over close to the Kentucky line. Well, in 2022, we had truly catastrophic flooding in Letcher County, Kentucky, and some in Pound, Virginia. Well, during that time, those two recreation sites were flooded. Now they're at a lake, so the lake level rose, of course, and
Mm-hmm.
there was runoff and some issues. Those were closed at that time. Today, while we were out riding around with Nick Freitas, we popped by there and I was showing it to Nick, and we went down in there. It's absolutely shouldn't be closed. It needs sand at the swimming area, and there needs to be some work done at the camping area. But they had changed the signs. So we'll get back to the signs in just a second, but it said this is closed due to Hurricane Helene. No,
Uh-huh.
this is closed due to flooding 2 years ago that
Uh-huh.
you all still have not restored. And now you've changed the sign to update it to the new disaster that you're capitalizing on so that you can keep it closed. That's what this is.
Uh-huh.
Now, speaking of those signs, during this closure, when you approached National Forest, there were no, the big traffic signs normally they'll put when a road's closed. There were no signs there saying don't enter. There was not even a little sign saying this forest is closed. There was no signage anywhere.
Mm.
You would When you would go up this area called High Knob, you drive up the road becomes National Forest. You could go straight or hook a left. We always hook a left. You'd hook a left and you would go out towards Eagle Knob, and the you pass there's a place called High Knob Tower. You pass it on the main road's going this way. Well, there's a cutoff that cuts back, like steeply back.
Uh-huh.
And you can go to a parking lot and go to this observation tower. The only sign was an 8.5 by 11 printer sheet that was printed in like 16 point that said, "This is closed. Don't travel here. $5,000 fine, 6 months in jail."
Wow.
There was nothing, no signage. There was no like effort to really get this word out. It was like quiet and weirdly quiet because we live in an area filled with hunters.
Mm-hmm.
I sent you the numbers for the areas that were affected by the closures. I think we said it was 12,000 hunters and fishermen that
Mm-hmm.
were affected. Well, when you do the math on that, the money value was over $1 million. So
Yeah.
the state is who issues your license and your tags. But then you buy your national forest stamp, which I guess you could say is your federal land license for
Right.
$4. And the national forest is all there is here. There is no state forest. So it's not like you can go hunt somewhere else.
Yeah.
So they take in all this money for those licenses, and then you couldn't hunt. Well, they weren't refunding the money either.
Right. So 1.2-ish million,
Yeah.
just sorry about you. Initially, when this was closed, and they closed it for a year. They said we're going to close it from
And
October to October.
yes. So the initial closure was for the year. You were not going to hunt, hike, fish, go boating, kayaking, anything else. But speaking of that, since we're going to talk about the boating, the Corps of Engineers property, there were two here. One
Mm-hmm.
called Flanagan Dam and the other's called Pound Reservoir. Those were still open, but you could only hunt, I think it was 300 yards offshore, but you weren't allowed to go on the property to go to the boat launch to put your boat in the water to get 300. I guess you were going to airdrop in like an army ranger. I don't know.
Wow. Wow.
It would.
So
It's stupid.
so did I'm sure obviously politicians heard about this. How do you think we got this reversed? Did Governor Youngkin did it get to his desk
Well,
or
this is federal lands. So it wasn't a state decision, but I do, and I'm sure you know this.
yeah, but hopefully
Um,
they put some pressure on the feds.
right. They can't directly change it, but they can put pressure on the people who can. And I
Mhm.
know that Nick Freitas and Israel Oakwind did that. Now, I don't know whether Governor Youngkin did or not. His response was a petting, oh, this is a federal problem. I can't
Mm.
do anything about it. Nick Freitas was like, who's enforcing it? And I said, well, the federal game warden here, Nick, retired, and that position hasn't been backfilled. So it'll be your guy. And he was like, oh, no.
Mm.
And I'll be down there Monday. And I
Mhm.
have questions. How are we going to enforce this? This is the state. That's a federal issue. How are we going to enforce this?
Yeah.
So
That was a very common sentiment when I posted the video. A lot of people were like, "Do it anyway. Screw them." Now, I don't know. I mean, doing what I do for a living, I'm not willing to risk getting a poaching ticket or anything, but I don't really disagree with that fundamentally. They're going to tell you you can't hunt on your land for no reason.
I
Mm,
agree. So being a law enforcement family, my brother is a deputy. My son is a corrections officer. My husband he's now just a liaison to law enforcement, but he still holds his credentials and is on the roster of the sheriff's office. We can't, first of all, afford to be paying $5,000 a piece in federal fines.
right.
But second of all, we also can't afford to go to jail for 6 months, which was part of the threat. And if you say you don't care about that, say you're going to risk it, and if you get caught, your consequence is going to be probably just the fine, and maybe you have that much per person to pay. But what about if they say, well, we're not going to put you in jail for 6 months, but you have a lifetime ban
Right.
on hunting national forests?
Mm-hmm.
Now you paid $5,000 plus you can never hunt again.
Right.
And that sounds like, "Oh, we're patriots, let's risk it," and I'm not saying that I don't know people who went ahead.
Yeah.
I'm just
Good for
saying
them.
that I'm just saying that it's not always as cut and dry as just saying, "Well, I'm
Oh,
not
of
gonna
course
comply,"
not. Yeah. Yeah.
because me not complying look like a $5,000 fine. But if my son, my husband, my brother doesn't comply, it looks like they lose their credentials in law enforcement.
Mm,
So sometimes maybe that looks like a wife and a daughter-in-law and a daughter who don't give a flip
right.
and they take the risk.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe
Yeah.
that's what it looks like. You have to assess the situation and act accordingly.
Well, I think this is certainly a much broader issue in our society with our politicians. And I think we're kind of getting to the point where local regional law enforcement is going to have to just say we're not enforcing that. Like we've seen it with a lot of overreach on the Second Amendment, um, where deputies are like, "No, we're not doing that.
Yep,
Screw you."
that's here.
Yeah,
That's here. So the county that we live in is a 2A sanctuary. We were one of the first 2A sanctuaries, I believe, in the state of Virginia. But pretty much, if you came here and you talked to the sheriff about the different things being introduced, he would tell you on the ones that were clearly unconstitutional, we're not enforcing that.
good. Yeah.
That's what a 2A sanctuary is. You don't have to worry about your guns when you come right here.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, so going back to how this decision was made by some bureaucrat. Like, and you go back to the head of the snake, and Deb Haaland is a preservationist, not a conservationist. And the difference is
Mhm.
the main problem that I see with it is preservation doesn't raise any money. You just take
Right.
hunting out of the equation, and then there's no funding mechanism for those roads, more importantly for the wildlife. It's a
Correct.
free for all. We let the predators run rampant, we don't manage them,
Yes.
they wipe out the deer, everything gets
Yep.
sick eventually. And you know what, back in 1700 that worked, because there weren't, well, now there's like 360 million people here, but there was 330 million people in America. It doesn't work like that anymore. There's too many people. Wildlife is confined to restricted areas. Some of them are massive, right? But they are confined to these areas, and we have to manage them in a way that benefits them and us at the same time. And
That's right.
preservation doesn't do that.
Hunters are conservationists, and I think so
Mm.
often that gets well, not overlooked. It gets painted over with the idea that
I think
it's
it's
a cruel.
bastardized. They don't even like connect the dots, and then they vilify you for, oh really, are you paying for this stuff? You like to go hiking? Thank you, thank a hunter. You're not paying for it.
Correct. Not only that, but it's painted over as a savage sport.
Mm.
Maybe some people hunt for trophies and that's all they do and they don't eat any of the meat, but the majority of hunters are hunters for food. We're not
Mm-hmm.
talking about hunting. There are people who do it, and there's tons of influencers who do it, and good on them. They can find a 24 point buck that, but most hunters are just hunting for food. And
Yep.
here, that's the case. We don't have trophy bucks here. You might have, in a lifetime, you might see one that might even be a small, like considered trophy. You're
Yeah.
not gonna, this isn't Ohio. We aren't
Right.
growing cornfields here.
Uh-huh. So what, like, would you consider an 8 point like a trophy?
No.
No.
That's pretty I mean, depending on how big it is. I mean, I've
Uh-huh.
seen some pretty big 8 points, but no, I wouldn't spend $500 to mount that and hang it on the wall.
Uh-huh. So what is a nice, like a nice deer in your part of the world?
Oh, a nice deer is a doe because it'll eat just like a 16 point buck.
Right.
But, if I were gonna put one on the wall, I'd say 14 or 16 point. I'm not gonna put an 8
Okay.
point buck on the unless it's, like, in rut and the neck's this big,
Uh-huh.
maybe
Oh yeah.
then it would have to be a giant.
Yeah. Yeah.
But for the most part, people aren't doing that.
Uh-huh.
Trophies are expensive. To put a deer on your wall, taxidermy is expensive.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're
Well, and
hunting
the
food.
yeah, and that's part of the hunting experience is like, well, what is the trophy? That's different to every person. And there's no right
Oh,
or
my
wrong
trophy is
answer.
my freezer.
Right.
My trophy is my freezer full of food.
Mm-hmm. Well, sometimes you get the best of both worlds, though, and you do
Of
get the
course,
16
yeah,
point buck and
sure, and
and
we'll
the
bleach
freezer
out
full.
this even, an 8 point buck, we might bleach out the skull and hang it on the wall of the cabin.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not gonna mount it.
So, what would you say is like the number one venison recipe at the Payne House?
Oh, and we love well, we make really good deer jerky, but, um, tenderloin biscuits for breakfast cannot be beat.
Mm.
And we love roast. And deer burger powers probably 85% of the meals that get made in any kitchen and anywhere in our family.
Uh huh.
So I would say probably Mark's favorite is roast. My daughter's favorite is a tenderloin biscuit. My son and daughter-in-law, Lord, my daughter-in-law is just a chef with it. They make so many interesting things. And I saw it, by the way, your Dove jalapeno poppers, was that what it was?
Oh yeah,
They
yeah.
make
Uh huh.
they do that with deer heart and with deer meat, and we make breakfast sausage. I mean, we turn that deer meat into everything.
Mm-hmm.
you'd be hard pressed to find a recipe that one of us would not say, "This is my favorite."
I've
And we
got
share a lot of those.
oh yeah, yeah. I've got an elk heart in the freezer, and I'm just trying to
Tacos.
yeah, yeah. Uh, but yeah, that's probably up next for me as far as and people think like, oh, heart, that's like the nasty bits, but I think we've turned the corner on that. I think I started doing this 15 years ago. Heart wasn't like a main thing, even hardcore hunters were utilizing. But I think over the last 6 or 7 years, and I'm not saying you guys specifically, I'm just saying like
Right.
not a lot of people. I'd say 10 to 20% of hunters I came across actually kept the heart. I would say now it's
Right.
maybe closer to half.
I think you're right. Um, I'll never forget the first time that my nephew killed he was I don't know how old he was, probably 7 or 8 years old. He killed his first deer on his own,
Mm-hmm.
and the first thing my brother did was jerk the heart out of it and tell him, "Here, have you a little, right straight right then, have a slice," because
Uh-huh.
that's something that was kind of a tradition that you would right while it's still warm even, have you a bite of it. And I thought my nephew was absolutely gonna pass straight out. He was fine with the field
Mm.
dressing, but don't hand him no guts to eat. But he was fine with it as tacos once it was cooked.
Uh-huh. My son is all about like you said, your nephew getting his hands in there and getting all bloody,
Mhm.
and he loves cleaning anything. But when I went to go smear the blood on his face from his first year, he was like, "Nope." I was like, well, "That's weird. You got it all over your arms." He's like, "Nah, I don't want it on my face." I'm like,
Yep, you gotta have it right here, right
"Yeah,
here, right here. That's
no,
part
he
of
wasn't."
it.
But then like that same season, I took him dove hunting, and we're cleaning the dove, and literally the heart's still beating, and he just eats it. Just pulls it out and eats it.
He
It's like,
grew
"Is
in
this safe to eat?"
he
And I was
grew
like,
into
"Yeah,
it.
I'll eat one with you." Yeah, yeah.
He grew into it.
Raising little
Kids are funny.
savages. Yeah.
Kids are funny, in our family, like, my grandson's 1, and he's in a backpack right now in the woods. My granddaughter is 2 weeks old, and yesterday evening, I had her while the grandson was hunting until dark with his mom and dad. My daughter-in-law, who was 2 weeks postpartum, was dragging out a doe last night at dark.
Hmm. Hmm.
I mean, our kids are in the forest from birth.
Yeah. I have pictures of my son in a stroller. It's me, him, the dog, and I have a shotgun, and we're bird hunting, dove hunting. And he's got his
Mhm,
bottle, and he was like, "Dad," he asked me recently, "When was the first time I went hunting?" And I was like, "Hold on, let me show you this picture." I was like, "You're not going to
mhm.
remember it, but you've always been hunting."
Always, yeah. So I had my son, close to Memorial Day in 2003, and, the day we came home from the hospital, we left the hospital and went to the lake and went fishing on the way home.
Oh, wow.
So, we've literally had these children in the woods since birth.
Uh-huh.
And kids are funny, if they don't grow up with it, I think sometimes it's hard for them to get into it. But I'm finding more and more that kids who were not raised in these outdoor households are more and more interested. I have more people from cities who reach out to us on our social media platforms and are like, "How do I like, do you just walk out in the woods and kill a deer? How do you find the deer? Do and they'll call it catching a deer or
Right.
whatever. And, I explained to them it's a lot more work than what it looks like. There's months of looking around and paying attention and finding trails and seeing the movement of the animals and tracking things like that and getting out in the woods and scouting ahead of this. And that's what this closure, and we haven't got to this part yet, but during the closure, we weren't allowed to go into the woods to retrieve our equipment.
Mm.
And 2 days before opener, our stuff had been there for weeks. Tree stands were there ready to go, cameras were out there ready to go, and they're not cheap.
Mhm.
So not only were you not allowed to go in and hunt, you also were not allowed to go in to retrieve thousands of dollars worth of equipment that you can't hunt somewhere else without.
Right. Right. Huh. Another catch 22. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's insane.
So, I mean, yeah, you have to, $2,500 worth of equipment out there, but it might cost you $5,000 and 6 months in jail to go get it.
Jeez. Yeah. Um, as far as the hurricane, and you did say parts of Virginia were affected. You've heard about like
Mhm.
the $750 they offered American citizens.
So my best friend is actually in Asheville area. She is the director of pharmacy for UNC Pardee,
Mm-hmm.
and she and I have talked extensively about this, and also we experienced this in 2022 when we were doing aid over in Kentucky in Letcher
Mm-hmm.
County. And I see that they're saying that this is it's a loan, and that's right in a sense that when you get your payout from your insurance, if you ever get one, you do have to pay it back. And people are sorry, my puppies are back
Yeah,
here
no worries.
flapping their ears. People have said, "Well, why do you have a problem with that if you're gonna get an insurance payout? Because that's double dipping." Well, no, I don't know about you, but my homeowner's deductible is $1,000 or $1,500, somewhere in there. So that $750 isn't even gonna fill that gap,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and that is my out of pocket. So not only is it pathetic that they're only being offered $750 and being told they have to pay it back, it's also not double dipping because of those deductibles.
Well, yeah, and like I'll play this clip for you, but no, I don't see any of the figureheads saying that it's a loan, right? That was in the fine print, and here's what this one Georgian had to say.
Relief and assistance that we have been providing
That's
has
Kamala.
included FEMA providing $750.
There is a FEMA man who came on and explained something very serious about this $750 that you guys don't know, and that they're not going to tell you. And unless you have a magnifying glass in the contract that they're going to sign during your inspection, you'll never see it. So you're going to hear it from me and hopefully from everybody else who is going to share this shit around. The $750 is a loan. It's not free. They're not giving it to you. It's a loan. And if you don't pay back that $750 loan within a year, they're going to seize your property. So, do not take the money. Doesn't matter how hard you feel life is right now. Don't take it. It is a carrot on the string.
So I mean, there you have one guy's perspective on it, and I hadn't until I saw that. I was just like under the impression because this is what Kamala is saying. By the way, where's Joe? Anybody seen Joe? Can we get a welfare check on Joe? Uh,
Maybe Jill's who made that decision.
yeah. Well, but Kamala doesn't say it's a loan. She says we're giving $750. Okay, $750. What a slap in the face. What are illegals getting when they come into the country? $2,500. 2,500.
Yes.
And then
Yes.
FEMA says, "Sorry, we have depleted all of our funds." Well, okay, wait. Wait, I thought the American taxpayers were paying into that. Well, we gave it to all the illegals. So now we can't take care of actual Americans.
So for me, this gets into so many different things. And first of all, it's not double dipping. So for anybody out there who thinks that's double dipping, it's not. Second of all, I'm not quite sure how it would play out in court if they actually tried to seize that property, because obviously they're only going to be able to have a $750 lien against it.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have a $750 lien against a $200,000 house, how are you going to seize that? Because
Right.
that's not, I don't, I don't know how they would make that work. In my mind, what I think they would do is take your tax refund if you were getting one, or put a judgment against you to affect your credit and ability to live in other places, etc. Um, it's shameful that it's only $750 when we're doing all that we're doing for so many other programs. But also, I just want to ask you this: when has any government ever given you anything? Your
Yeah.
tax refund is not a gift from the federal government. That's money you loaned them interest free.
Right.
That's the only money I've ever gotten back from the government. I don't know
Uh-huh.
about you.
Yeah. Yeah. No. And again, not giving here, but fine to give it to anyone that crosses the border illegally, which, by the way, is a crime.
Mm.
You're now a criminal when you're here illegally.
And
And
it's a federal crime.
I don't blame the people that are coming across. If I was in their situation and we just said, "Hey, America's welcoming anyone in, come across," I would do this. I'd be first in line. It doesn't make it not a crime. So, and you gotta have law
Right.
and
And
order.
it's a federal crime
Yeah.
that it doesn't appear, and I'm not saying this is always the case because I'm not going to make blanket statements here, but it doesn't seem like they're giving them $5,000 fines and 6 months in jail.
No, they're giving them a reward. Like, you broke the law. Here's your
Correct.
money. Here's your hotel. Here's all of the FEMA dollars that now. And I mean, now we have this other
Absolutely.
hurricane, Milton, coming to smack Florida again, and there is no money. There's none.
And I don't have words to explain to you how much I dislike our federal government and really most of our state government as
Mm-hmm.
well. I mean, just government in general. In our culture here in Central Appalachia, government is not our friend.
Mm-hmm.
Community, our neighbors are a friend. And I asked this question yesterday, and a lot of people got up in arms about it. But why were your neighbors more equipped to respond to this hurricane than the government was? Well, that's because your neighbor actually cares, and
Right.
the government doesn't.
They do not care about you. Anyone that thinks that
And
they
it wasn't
do.
just because of their close proximity; it was because they cared.
Yeah. Well, and this is just another example. I mean, if anyone thought the government cared about you after trying to, force vaccines on you and do all this and make you lose your job because you didn't want to take a vaccine that was an experiment, or that they tried to force your kids to take when kids weren't even getting sick. My kids all got COVID. We didn't know they had COVID. The only reason we found out is because my wife, who's a nurse practitioner, entered us into this. It was just like a little research study where, because we had both had COVID, and so she said, "Hey, we want to check our antibodies, natural antibodies, at 3 months and 6 months." It was through UT Health, and so she put all 5 of us in there, and it was really interesting to see how our antibodies, how long they lasted. And then the kids went back to school in 2021, and they never missed a day of school. They never said they were sick. They had never had COVID before that we knew of, and then all 3 of them smacked for, sky high antibodies. It's like, oh, they were so sick that we didn't even know it, but yet you want them to take this stupid experiment and put it in their body, and we're like, no, we're not doing that. But
Well, I won't diminish the fact that there were definitely people who did die of COVID,
sure,
and
my
I
mom
won't
got very
diminish.
sick, almost died.
Yes, it did really waylay a lot of people, but it almost. I'm trying to watch my words here.
Oh, you don't have to do that on this show.
You know, sometimes we hunt with a shotgun, and other times we hunt with a rifle. And that seemed more like a rifle that was directly aimed at a certain demographic of our population,
Mhm.
age group especially. And then I believe, and this is, gosh, I'm getting so far into my tinfoil hat era, but I believe that that one just wasn't aimed. You're talking about your kids. I just don't believe that that bullet was aimed at them.
Hmm.
I believe that that bullet was aimed at the population who had the wisdom and the ability to recognize what else would be coming down the line later,
Yeah.
and would be here to talk to their generations about it and to point out things that they saw that were patterns. And I just, when I look at it, I look at it in that way. I will not diminish that people died. I also will not say that everybody who got it was catastrophically damaged by it, but a good portion of even healthy people have had long COVID symptoms. But I also know people who died after they got the jab.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and that was the thing. Hey, if you want to take it, fine. That's your
Just
choice.
don't make everybody.
Right.
God,
But
make it a
just like
choice.
that's your choice, where is my choice to say no? Like,
Correct.
I don't know if you saw
Correct.
this. I literally just saw this before we got on the call. FEMA webinar says agency moving toward LGBTQIA plus alphabet people, disaster equity over helping most people. And here's the photo here from the Daily
You know what?
Daily Caller.
The last time I checked in Asheville and all of, Marshall and Irwin, Tennessee, all these places that were so catastrophically affected by this flood, not one of the neighbors who responded to help another neighbor have asked how you're voting. They have not
Mm,
asked who you love, what were you born? They didn't care.
right.
What they cared was, this is a human life that's in danger, and I'm a human, and that is my neighbor, and I'm going to help them in whatever way that I possibly can. No agendas, no politics, nothing except human compassion for another human. And that is utterly lacking in our government infrastructure that responds to
Yeah.
disaster. There is no equitable way to address a disaster of this size.
Right. But yet
Everybody
here they
in
are
that
trying to jam equity into the equation, saying we got to
you
put a
can't.
preference on the marginalized alphabet crowd for. I'm
You
sorry,
cannot do that.
they're just
I'm
Americans,
sorry.
just like anyone else. Help them all.
You know, and I don't know if you know this, but I'm light skinned, but I'm a Lungeon. I'm not a white girl.
Uh-huh.
And um I just can't imagine just saying, well, we need to worry about only the indigenous or only the white people or only the, legit LGBTQIA community. I can't imagine being that way. Only our government thinks that way. I mean, I know that there are people and individuals who do too, but our government overwhelmingly so.
Right. Right.
And it's
And
because of
that's
lobbyists.
yeah. And that's where it all starts, right? Is here's this messaging, and so you have to pick your tribe, and everyone else
I
is
get
the
so
enemy.
mad.
But we're not. Like I don't understand it. We're all just Americans. So why are we trying to slam it in
Right.
reverse and make it go back to separate but equal? Like, no, we're all just
You know,
equal.
not one time have I ever cared when and I've helped in a lot of disasters. So,
Mm-hmm.
over here in Kentucky during COVID, we had people who were literally starving. My best friend, who is part of the LGBTQ community, and he's a Democrat, but we're still friends.
Right.
He and I together, me as far right as you can get, and him in the middle on the left, work together to feed these communities. And we didn't care
Yeah.
who you were or what your beliefs or who you voted for or anything. It's the government that does this, and our mass media putting out this division, saying you can't care about somebody who doesn't think like you.
Yeah. Yeah. Here's the thing I go back to is on social media, people say this MAGA crowd, half the country's in a cult. Guess what?
That is so stupid.
Idiot. I was a Republican before Trump. I'll be a Republican after Trump. Has nothing to
That
do with MAGA this, MAGA that. It ain't a cult any more than you're in some stupid Democrat cult. Listen, you're just a Democrat. I'm just a Republican.
that's
May the
right.
best
And
man
that's just
win.
how we
Yeah.
think. That is just I am and have been my entire life a Republican, registered Republican, have never voted a ticket that wasn't a Republican ticket.
Mm-hmm.
But I've also never found a Democrat that I thought matched my values.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
If I ever find one, I'll let everybody know.
right. I mean, I feel like in recent years, and I don't think he really matched my values, but probably the only person I can think of in recent years who even like touched some of my values was RFK Jr.
Yeah.
And that was because of his anti-jab his you can't mandate this. Let's make America healthy again.
Yeah.
I think we can all get on board with choice in whether or not you're poked.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know. I
Well, thank God
I
he's
try
on
not
Team Trump now. That was like the best free agent pickup of all time.
that
And the thing
was.
is, like, that dude, he has the history with Big Pharma
Mhm.
and with the food industry, and he can actually make changes because you guys, homesteading, like,
Mhm.
you're not sucked into this processed food,
No,
never ending cycle that American kids are now. And it's disgusting. And it's, why are we, our life expectancy is going down in this
it
country.
is. It's going way down. And,
It starts with what we're putting in
mom
our
and
bodies.
yeah, my mom and dad would tell you that I can't remember what they quoted a year, and they said from that time until now that they had watched the steady decline of the health of the population just here in our area. And as sparsely populated as we are, that it's on a much more colossal scale across the nation.
Mm-hmm.
And it started, I want to say mom was talking about when they villainized eggs and butter in favor of only the white, and maybe it was Crisco or margarine or something like
Oh,
that.
yeah.
And she was like, they told everybody that this was the answer. It was going to keep your cholesterol from being high, et cetera, all these things. But what we saw was not that. What we saw was people began to die sooner and people were less healthy. We saw more inflammatory disorders, on and on and on and on.
Mm-hmm.
But the people who remained on a diet of natural animal fats and animal products that were minimally processed stayed healthier.
Yeah.
And, my family, by necessity, has eaten more wild game than they have anything from the grocery store. And, my dad's going to be 72, mom's going to be 72 as well. They could probably outdo me.
Mm-hmm.
If we were to go start walking in the woods, daddy would probably outdo me by a long shot.
Mm-hmm.
Mom probably would outdo dad by a long shot. And
Yeah.
that's at 72 years old. I have pictures of my mom and dad on our social media. Mom had a stringer full of fish, and one of them, I think she had hit her limit, and dad had hit his too, and she was holding it up, and they had hiked in to fish somewhere.
Mm.
And I was like, if they're 72 and they can be self sufficient, there's no excuse for you.
Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
not.
Well, interesting stat I heard recently, and it was quite alarming. Is like almost half of American teenagers have pre-diabetes symptoms. So that tells you, even if they're not overweight, it's what we're putting in our body.
Yes.
It's all this processed. It's Lucky Charms. It's Pop Tarts. It's nacho cheese. It's everything, and it's available in school lunches. It's available everywhere. We've got stuff in our
Yep.
pantry that, and when I listened to this podcast, I told my wife, I was like, we're going to revamp the way that we think about food, because we eat pretty healthy, but the kids snack on this garbage. And I like to go to Taco Bueno like once in a while and stuff my face with processed junk.
80,
But
80-20, right? 80-20.
But today I ate like 12 ounces of medium rare backstrap and 3 soft-boiled eggs, real butter in the cast iron, sear it for like 30 seconds on each side, and then salt and pepper, and that's it. And people, going back to what you said, I think it was like in the 60s is when our health officials started saying red meat and eggs are bad and butter's bad. Like, that's literally the stuff that gives you cognitive brain functionality, especially the fat. Like if you're eating a steak, not a lot of fat on wild game, but if you're eating a steak, like I have one daughter and I who we eat all the fat, and the rest of the other three are like, I don't really like that as much. But we're like, well, we're going to be smarter than you. Our brain's going to be functioning.
And that's true. So, a lot of people think, and this is getting a little bit off topic, but a lot of people think that, they get dipping into homesteading and they think, I'm going to raise rabbits.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if you raise rabbits, you better raise pigs too, because you'll starve to death with a full belly. You have to have that fat. Your brain can only synthesize fat. And I'm sure your wife's told you this a million times, but your brain can only that's what it eats is fat. You have to have it. Without it, your brain cannot function. And so that is one thing that we keep a ton of on hand is, small chicken fat, pork fat, tallow. And of course we don't use the deer tallow to cook. I don't know if you enjoy deer tallow. I'm sure there's somebody out there who does, but we use it to waterproof things.
Yeah.
And we don't have that many elk here. You were talking about elk. back in a while. We're just now getting our population to start to come back here for
Awesome.
that. But we use the deer tallow to waterproof our gear.
Are they coming in from Kentucky?
They are.
Yeah.
There. So I guess it's hard for you or anybody to understand exactly where we are. I can be in Kentucky in about 13 or 14 minutes.
Huh.
I can be in Tennessee in about 30 minutes, just across the line.
Mm-hmm.
I can be to West Virginia in about an hour and a half. I can be in Asheville, North Carolina in about 2 hours.
Oh, wow.
I can be down in Irwin where all that devastation was in 1 hour.
Yeah.
So where we live is further west than Detroit. We're closer to 9 other state capitals than we are our own. Um, we're not really part of any. I mean, we are part of Virginia, but we're
They're
not
just
really treated like we are.
backwoods Appalachian hillbillies. Yeah.
Yeah, we're part of the state of Appalachia or the state of Franklin.
Okay.
That's where we would be. If you were to look at the map of places that don't really exist, it's the state of Franklin.
So, going back to the original reason why we wanted to have you on, here's what I think. And you talked about your tinfoil hat earlier. Here's mine. Like, it's all about control, like in the shots
Absolutely.
and everything else. How much will they let us control them? And like the fundamental thing that Marxism and communism is founded on, the backbone, is control the food, control the people. Because people aren't going to starve.
And when you look at it, Appalachia is kind of, and Texas too, I'm sure. I'm just not that aware of how hunting goes in other places. I can only speak for here. Central Appalachia is kind of one of the last strongholds of people who can take care of themselves, who have that generational wisdom. And not only do we have that wisdom, but we are also surrounded by just an enormous amount of natural resources. We live in the mountains. There's plenty of timber. There's plenty of wildlife. There's plenty of water. There's coal under our feet that we could heat with. I mean, and there's natural gas under our feet. There are so many things here. Lithium. I'm sure you've heard tons of people talking about the lithium. There's so many things here that we have that isn't found very many other places. And I think that they picked the wrong place because Appalachia, no matter which side of the political aisle that you fall on, we know that the government's the government and we don't trust them.
Right. Yeah. Well, you and me both. They're useless, really, truly. We pay all this money in taxes, and what do we get for it at the end of the day?
Not one thing. Not
What do
we
get
get our wait. I started to say we get our money back at the end of the year, but no, we don't. We just get back like about 1/10 of what we pay in.
Here's some shekels for you. Yeah, for your trouble. Yeah, exactly.
Here's some. Let me flip you a coin while I flip Ukraine, and we won't get into that.
Yeah.
While I flip Ukraine and everybody else billions.
So that was another thing about the $750. A buddy and I did the math on a different, like a more political podcast I do, and the average right now is somewhere between like $8,000 and $12,000 per Ukrainian citizen of our tax dollars we've sent to Ukraine. And here, sorry, southeastern United States, here's your $750 loan. What a slap in the face.
Yeah, here's your $750 loan while we give billions of dollars and we're trillions of dollars in debt, while we're experiencing the highest cost of living ever, basically.
Yep.
I'm sure there'll be somebody out there that said, she doesn't know what she's talking about. It's not the highest ever. Pretty dang high.
Highest in my lifetime. I'm 43.
I'm 41. If you would have told me that gas would be the price that gas is when I was 16 years old and started driving, and it was what I think I was paying 97 cents a gallon or something like that.
Yeah.
If you told me that it would go up 4 times over in 20 years or 25 years, I would have laughed at you.
Yeah. My first car, I was filling up for 89 cents a gallon at the racetrack.
I can remember when 9/11 happened. Everybody flocked to the gas stations, and they were like, "Gas is going to go over $2 a gallon." Oh, how I wish for it to just be just over $2 a
Mhm.
gallon. When we're looking at $4 a gallon, it's ridiculous. I mean, and not only that, but and we talk about the cost of gas, but the cost of gas impacts the cost of food directly
Right.
because of the cost of transporting food to your stores, even just if it's a short distance.
Well, and machinery to harvest, the crops, all that
Correct.
stuff.
The machinery. The cost of everything has gone up exponentially, even the cost of junk food.
Mhm.
It's
Mhm.
just ridiculous. And there's my dad, I've asked my dad so many times. I always ask daddy everything. I mean, I ask my husband a lot too, but Mark's not very, he's 57. When I really want to know something from history, I ask daddy. And I asked him, I said, Daddy, do you think it'll ever get better? And he said, No, honey. Once they raise it, it never goes back down.
No, he's not wrong. I mean, maybe 10 cents here, 20 cents there, but it always comes back up. Every what
Always.
I mean, once the economy tilts back in the right direction, you think that eggs are going to go back to $1.99 a dozen? No, they're not.
I mean, my eggs are not $1.99 a dozen. I'm getting them out of the backyard, but
That was
they're
another
actually, I
thing
think it's
during COVID. Lots of egg stands
feed.
popped up in, more
Yes.
rural communities.
And the price of feed has gone up so much. I mean, it's getting ridiculous. And I think you nailed it with saying it's about control. And I know that there will be somebody who kicks back and says, well, the government doesn't own the feed companies. If you don't think that there is a hand in hand relationship between our government and large corporations, you don't know very much about our government.
I would say you don't know much about anything, really.
You don't know much about anything.
And none of it will
And
change without term limits for all of these nut jobs because
they
and
will
maybe some of them go into it with good intentions. I truly believe politicians,
some
some go in with good intentions. It doesn't take long for the swamp to get to them, lobbyists to get to them. Okay, you took that money. Now we own you. We own you. Don't forget that. You want that money
Mhm,
for your next campaign? Okay, well, you owe us. So
that's right.
once they have their fingers in you, their fingernails in you, they don't let go. But if you had term limits, like why does the president only get 2 terms? But then all of these career politicians, Pelosi, McConnell. I mean, it's on both sides. Both parties are corrupt as hell on
Biden
that
was in
front.
for a long time before he
By
was ever president.
40-year politician. Why is that a
Mhm.
thing? It's supposed to be a civic service. You're doing your duty, serving your country. They don't even look at it as we're going to serve our country and serve our citizenry. They look at it as how can I get really rich really fast. Oh, and maybe if I can get reelected, I can stay here for 30 years. And I mean, what is Pelosi worth now? And the fact that they can insider trade is another thing. It's like
Mhm.
what we have let these people get away with is mind blowing to me.
It is mind-blowing, and when you think about it, you know, yeah, some of the salaries are higher than others, but look at people, like, look at how much money they had going in, and then look at their money now.
Well, we have the
And
worst example here in Texas. And I had this guy on my show, was a big fan, but Dan Crenshaw has he has gotten richer faster than any other person in the Congress or Senate. And it's
Mhm.
I don't know what his I'd have to look. It's common knowledge. I mean, you can find out his net worth, but it's astronomical. And he's only been in for what 4 or 5 years now, 6 years at the
Yes.
most, I think. So like that guy. Oof.
I could talk all day politics. I really could. I don't like to do it on camera, but I could talk all day politics.
Yeah. Well,
Um,
yeah, me too.
but it's absolutely it's a shame that people don't seem to notice it. And no matter what you say, to try to open their eyes, and even if you show them the cold hard facts, the numbers.
Mhm.
Here's the the spreadsheet, dude. This is what they were worth going in. Here's what they're worth right now. Here's what they did in the middle. It's just like my eyes are closed. I don't want to see that. Don't tell me that. Or it's too big of a challenge to get that person gone.
Yeah.
And who was it? Feinstein
Yeah.
is great.
Diane. Mhm.
I mean, she was like a bajillion.
Yeah, no. The only way to get her out was death. The Grim Reaper had to come for her.
Yes. And I just can't. I don't have a lot of nice things to say about our politicians, but I will say, and one day this might change. I will say that Nick Freitas from Virginia, Israel Oakland from Virginia. Those are the only two that I have come across that I have seen show up where they don't have constituents to help with things they really don't have a horse in the race of. Israel actually has shown up, not, most politicians show up for a photo op. Israel shows up sometimes in a disaster area with his equipment from his farm, and he will stay there and work when photographers are long gone. When nobody's looking anymore, he's still there working.
Well, that tells
That's
you what
the
kind of
only two
character
that
he
I
has.
can name. Yeah, that's the only two that I can name that I would say, I think those two are pretty good. The
Oh,
rest, and I've dealt with several, I don't have anything nice to say about.
and that's a shame. And that's
It
like
is a shame.
fundamentally the biggest problem with this country right now.
Absolutely. The thing that I think that we're missing as a nation is that people, for one thing, they think that their voice doesn't matter. And I think that this example with the closures of the national forest and with the push to reopen them and the response being so quick after the push started, we do have a voice and it's important that we use it. And I recognize, I only have 80,000 social media followers and probably an email list of at most 7 or 8,000. It was them and people like you and people like Nick who came together as a network with us and did the push. It was our voices united that brought about this change. It wasn't because
Quickly.
the bureaucrat, it wasn't because the idiot in Roanoke was like, oh, my bad, I think I might have made a mistake. No, it was being told you have taken $1.2 million from Virginians. And not only do I care about it, 12,000 voting households in this district does, and about 200,000 other Americans who are willing to take 15 minutes out of their day to email you, email their senators, email my senators, and email the representatives in my area, as well as my governor. People don't realize, and I know you said you can't be a Democrat and Hunter, but I probably wouldn't stretch that far.
Well, so I think you can be a
Hunting crosses
casual.
party line.
It could be a hobby. I don't think it's a way of life. Like I'll put it like,
Well,
because here's the thing.
maybe.
Here's the thing. If you say I'm a hunter, but I don't think you should own an AR-15. You're not on my team.
No.
And a lot of Democrats would say that. This is another example. Like, I'm a hunter, but you shouldn't hunt bears. Or I'm a hunter, but you shouldn't use hounds to treat cats. Or I'm a hunter, but I think trapping is unethical. Like if the word "but" comes out of your mouth after I'm a hunter, you ain't on my team.
So I agree with you completely there. I do. I suppose I know where I live, and this is UMWA country. And I do know a lot of people who would call themselves Democrats, but they're more moderate, and they would never say any of those buts, but they would still call themselves a Democrat.
But then if you show them the funding of Pittman Robertson dollars and their side is saying,
well,
we want to, so then
yeah,
you've got to catch 22 of, okay, well, put your money where your mouth is, right?
No,
So
I'm with you. I'm with you. I just don't think I would stretch that far to say that because, again, I can.
It's a blanket statement. It is.
It's
But
it's
like
a it's, it's kind of like this blanket closure. I can't I can't lay that blanket on everybody. But what I can tell you is that hunting crosses party lines,
Mhm.
and that hunters as a community generally care more about conservation, one another, food on the table of others and themselves, and you know, just as about hunting and fishing and outdoorsman things more than anybody else. And even if they don't agree on who to vote for president, most of them will fight you for the right to hunt.
well, okay, but then I'll
And
say this, then why are they voting for the party that's closing?
I'm with you.
What
I
it always
cannot
goes back to
explain.
this. It always goes back to this. Like I know it's a blanket statement, but okay, you're going to vote against guns. Which party introduces
I'm with you.
99.9% of all anti-hunting legislation? They want to put restrictions on predator hunting, trapping, how all those things I just listed off. They want to restrict that. Okay,
With
well
you.
it ain't one side that's responsible for that. Well, it is one side.
I
It ain't my side.
I agree with you. And as I said, I always
So
vote.
okay, so we'll leave it like this. There are plenty of good people that vote Democrat that hunt, but they've got some internal conflict
I
that
think
they
it's
need
a
to
lack
suss
of
out.
understanding. I think it's a lack of understanding. I think that sometimes people they just don't believe that what they're seeing is what actually is, and that
Mhm.
you and I, people on the right, are sensationalizing it. And they're like, "Oh, it's not really like that." And yeah, it is. But you can't make them understand that. They have to come to that understanding on their own.
Well, I think November 5th, a lot of them will vote that way. I
God, I
truly
hope
do.
s-
Well, especially, I mean,
I
this
hope
disaster is this not the worst? Well, at least the most widespread disaster in American history. Is it? I mean, as far as
and
the
if
number of people and the size of the region affected, and why is the news downplaying it like, oh, it was just another little hurricane? It should
I
be
have
everywhere
been
all the time.
I have been here 41 years. My dad has been here, and my mom too, for 72 years. My husband's parents are almost 90, so they've been here that long, and none of them have ever seen a hurricane hit Appalachia like this. I mean, yeah, we get the outer bands.
Mhm.
We sometimes get heavy rain from it, but 25 plus inches of rain dropping and overwhelming the TVA dams, flooding out areas, and look at Chimney Rock. I mean, it's gone. They just condemned Marshall today.
Hmm.
I mean, and never, never. And Dad was talking just the other day about the floods that were like in the 70s, and he was like, even that it's like you're talking about a drop in a bucket compared to this is the whole freaking bucket.
Yeah, yeah. It's
This has been the largest natural disaster to happen in this part of the country, probably ever, if
oh
not
for
then
sure.
this century anyway, in
Yeah,
the last 100 years. But, again, back to the closing and the reopening, it was our voices together unified.
yeah. Well, yeah,
And
and
when
that's the positive thing, right? Because a lot of people are disenfranchised. Like certain conservatives, like, I just want to live and let live. Leave me alone. I don't want to be bothered to go vote. But you know what? You
and
you
you
you've
can't be that way.
you've got to, and this just proves like, hey, we still have a voice, and it happened fast. And when you told me at the beginning, like, well, it's open now, I was almost a little disappointed. Like, oh, I thought we were gonna be like
You
coming
wanted
in
to
here
have a
with
thought about it.
piss and
You're so
vinegar,
much
like
like
we're
me.
oh yeah, and then now that we actually won, like it's something to celebrate, obviously, and it happened so quick too. It was just like, wow, what a great
Yeah.
testament to the collective power of
I
yeah.
have to admit, it was I like a good fight.
Mm-hmm.
I really appreciate.
We KO'd them in the first round.
Yeah, and it's not I mean, I'm so thankful that it's reopened, but at the same time, I do enjoy a good fight, especially when it comes to this kind of stuff, and I would have liked to have had more opportunity to talk to more people, like, as far as letting them have it.
Yeah.
just because I'm ornery that way.
Yeah.
You know, I only got to let 4 or 5 people have it before it was like, okay, we give up.
Right.
And I'm like, well, I would like to have at least gotten to give it to a couple more people, but
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
is what it is. I'm
Well, we'll
glad that it's
celebrate
open.
it. It's a huge win. It's great
It
news
is a
for
huge win, and
Virginians in Appalachia.
it's not just a huge win here.
Mm.
I think that we don't understand that this is a huge win across the board because these closures today they're in the consolidated clinch in Mount Rogers district. Tomorrow they could be in a district near you, and pretty flippin' soon the whole place could just not be. We may not be allowed to hunt anymore. And
Mm.
when that day comes, if that day ever comes, you will see the do not comply come out of a lot of people who went through the proper channels this time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's no doubt about that. Well, I've certainly enjoyed the conversation. Like I said, it's good to celebrate that we got this thing shifted in the right direction as quickly as we did. But
Right.
and I think, you know, like I said, I was a little disappointed, as were you. We like a good fight. But I think the takeaway is the positive message that, you know, our voices were heard. We put pressure. We applied it where it needed to
Yes.
be applied, and it was, you know, it was heard. Our voices were heard, and we got
And
the
we need to
result we
continue.
wanted, and the result that we deserved. Like, it was asinine from the get-go.
We need to continue asking why it happened. We need to continue making sure that our federal representatives know that it better not happen again. We need to continue to push for the reopening of lands that are not yet open, like you were talking earlier about how they shut it down in Alaska. And there's also places I know out in like Montana and Wyoming, et cetera, that were on fire maybe a year or so ago and they're not, but they're still not reopened. I feel like this hasn't had the attention that it needed until it happened to happen in Appalachia.
Mm-hmm.
And not everybody has a platform to reach out to 80,000 people and say, help me. And so we need to amplify those voices when they come across us. When they say, this is happening here, we need to talk about it. And we need to make sure that people realize this was not an isolated incident and it needs to be looked at across the country.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thank you guys for bringing it to everyone's attention. I'm happy to help in any capacity that I can. Thanks again to Gabby who sent me
Oh, yeah.
the information regarding the situation, and for having you guys on. If you want to plug your social media so folks can follow along.
So we have a Substack, the Appalachian Homestead, and then we have an Instagram. It's at the Appalachian Homestead. We also have a YouTube at the Appalachian Homestead, but that's only cooking stuff.
Uh-huh.
And
Well, I like cooking wild game, so I'll check that out.
yeah, and we also have a website, AppalachianHomestead.org. Most of what we do is on Instagram, and it's just sharing the old self-sufficient Appalachian way.
Mm-hmm. Well, awesome, Shallon. I certainly appreciate it. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Sorry, my puppies, I thought they were about to go off. I heard somebody pull up. One more thing I wanted to say before we go. We really appreciate everything you've done. And I'm so sorry that Mark wasn't able to join us. He got caught up where he was gone this morning. When he made it back to his office, he had somebody there waiting that he wasn't expecting.
No problem at all. We'll catch him next time. Hey, thanks again.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Have a good one.
You too.